بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ومن والاه أما بعد باب الجنائز, the book of the chapter of funerals. Janaiz is the plural of either janaza, which means the deceased, or jinaza, which is basically the sledge or slab on which the deceased is placed. So in both cases over here, it means the funeral, all the events related to it, the time when a person passes away till the time they're placed into the grave. Right? And so the first thing that we need to know is that what we call death is not the end of a person's journey. It is basically a transition from this phase to the next, right? Because there's one other word that is used other than maut, and that's intiqal. You might have heard of it. And intiqal linguistically means to move from one place to another, right? And so that's what's happening. Your soul is moving from this earth, from this body, onto the next. And so our journey has not ended yet. And what that entails is that we should be preparing for the next phase of our life, right? Because this is not our permanent adult. This is not all that there is to life. We have to move on forward. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith mentioned in Tirmidhi, he said, أَكْثِرُ مِنْ ذِكْرِ هَازِمِ اللَّذَّاتِ, that you should excessively remember the thing that breaks down, or the thing that reduces a person's desires in this world, and that is death, right? In the other hadith he mentions, فَإِنَّهُ مَا ذُكِرَ فِي كَثِيرٍ إِلَّا قَلَّلَ, that whenever you remember death in excess, in the thing that is abundant, which is the dunya, because the dunya right now to us is very abundant. And when you remember death in dunya, in matters of dunya, illa qallala, this remembrance of death is going to reduce your indulgence within the dunya. Wala qalilin illa kathara, and whenever death is remembered in the thing that is less, which is the amal that the person does, right? Illa kathara is going to increase the amount of amal that you do to prepare for the next world, right? So in remembering death, that we have to go from this world to the next, we have to prepare for it. And what does that preparation involve? What are the things that we're supposed to do? So preparing for death, preparing for the next life, what a person should do is stop committing crimes and sins and transgressions towards their self and to others. For every mistake that's been done, a person should make a sincere tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they should involve themselves in as many good deeds as they can. Right? فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that those who are ready, or those who are willing to meet their Lord, then they should prepare for it by doing good deeds, right? And so that's something that we should always keep in mind, that we should always be preparing for the hereafter. And there are many hadith related to that, right? And verses from the Quran. One just needs to go over them to understand the importance of this phase of life. Now, coming back to the book, let's talk about the janais. إذا احتضر الرجل, when a person is close to death, وجه إلى القبلة على شقه الأيمن. Their face towards the Qibla on their right side, if that is possible. But if for some reason it's not, because there's not a lot of space, or maybe they're feeling extra pain on the right side, some injury or something, then it's okay to have them lie on their back or even on the left side if that is something that needs to be done. Right? And the reason why you face the person near death to the right side is because that is how you are to place them within the qabr, in the grave itself, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ, he instructed that when a person is about to die, actually Bara ibn Ma'rur radiallahu anhu, when he was about to die, he made this wasiyah that when I pass away, you should give 1/3 of my wealth in charity, and also that you face me towards the Qibla, right? And when the Prophet ﷺ learned of this, he said Asab al-Fitra, that he was correct in his view, right? And so that's why when a person is about to die, they will be shifted to their right. Other thing that we need to do is the Prophet ﷺ mentioned لَقِّنُ مَوْتَاكُمْ شَهَادَةَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, that you should tell those people who are about to die to say La ilaha illallah. And what it means is that you don't actually tell them to say that, but you make that dhikr out loud in their presence, right? Because it's a process of pain. If you force them or if you keep pestering them to say La ilaha illallah, they might end up saying something improper, right? And in order to avoid something like that, the people near the deceased or the one about to die should say La ilaha illallah out loud, just so that person remembers it. Another thing that you could do is to recite Surah Al-Yasin or even Surah Al-Ra'd, right? So reciting Surah Al-Yasin or Surah Al-Ra'd is something that the Fuqaha have also suggested that we do. Because Yasin includes the phases of afterlife, right? About death and what comes after it. So this is basically a kind of a reminder. And so this might prompt the person on the verge of death to actually repent, make tawbah, right? And say La ilaha illallah. And another benefit of this talqeen of La ilaha illallah is the hadith in which it's mentioned, Man kana akhiru kalamihi la ilaha illallah dakhil al-jannah. His last words are the shahadatain or the shahada, that person will enter paradise without any hisab. And so these are the things that a person should do. فَإِذَا مَاتَ, and if when that person finally passes away, شَدُّوا لَحْيَتَيْهِ وَغَمَّزُوا عَيْنَيْهِ, the people present should tie down their jaw, because when a person dies, their muscles are no longer working, and so the mouth is just going to drop wide open, right? And the eyes will be kind of like in a shock state. So it kind of creates a very disturbing scene. And so close the eyes, place the mouth together, and because the person is now dead, their body is going to solidify. It's going to become actually very rigid, right? And so you don't want to let the mouth left open. So just close it and tie it with a piece of cloth. And the people present there should recite this dua. Allahumma ghfir li fulan, take the name of the person who just passed away. وارفع درجته في المهديين واخلف في عقبه في الغابرين واغفر لنا وله يا رب العالمين وافسح له في قبره ونور له فيه. This dua can be found in the book Hisnul Hasin, the fortified fortress. And also the family members of the deceased, they should make these dua as well. Allahumma firli walahu wa aqibni minhu uqban hasana. That, oh Allah, forgive me and the deceased and give me in place of him a better replacement, in terms of ajr, in terms of sabr, and things like that. And other dua is probably to say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allahumma ajirni fi musibati wa akhlif li khayran minha. Right? That to our Lord we belong and to Him we return. That Allah give me in my time of troubles uh, the ajr, the sabr, right? وَأَخْلُفْ لِي خَيْرًا مِنْهَا. And in place of this musibah, in place of this infliction, give me something which is better. So once you're done with the initial stages, it's time to bathe the corpse before it is shrouded and then placed in the room. فإذا أرادوا غسله, when they decide to bathe the deceased, وَزَعُوهُ عَلَى سَرِيرٍ, they should place him on a dais, on a table, right? Not on the floor. Nowadays, in the morgues, they have this special kind of table with drainage system and everything. But in the case we don't have that, you're in a situation where you don't find it, the best thing would be to do is place a deceased on elevated state on a table, slab, or anything. So when you wash it, the water falls off and it's not collected um, beneath the body. وَجَعَلُوا عَلَى عَوْرَتِهِ خِرْقَةً, and you should place a piece of cloth over the deceased's private parts, the genitalia basically. And this process should remain throughout. I mean, the person washing should make the utmost effort not to see the aura of the person. And so from the belly button to the knees, whether male or female deceased, they should be covered, right? Because it is not permissible to see the aura of a person in their lifetime and even after their death. So you place that khirqa, that piece of cloth, then you remove the clothes of the person. Either you pull them off, or if it's not possible, you cut them off. وَنَزَعُوا ثِيَابَهُ, you remove the clothes. وَوَزَّعُوهُ, and the person performing the bath, they're going to make the wuzu. I wash the face, the hands, the feet. وَلَا يُمَزْمَزْ وَلَا يُسْتَنْشَقْ. But there's no need to rinse the mouth or the nose because it'll be extremely difficult to remove the water when we do that. So you just skip that part. ثُمَّ يُفِيزُونَ الْمَاءَ عَلَيْهِ, then the people will pour the water over the deceased. Right? وَيُجْمِرْ صَرِيرَهُ بِطْرًا, and if possible, then the table should be perfumed 3 times before the deceased was placed on it for washing. وَيُغْلَى الْمَاءُ بِالسِّدْرِ أَوْ بِالْخُرْصِ, the water should be boiled with either lotus or saltwork, just to improve the cleansing. فإن لم يكن, but if these things aren't available, فالماء القراح, then pure water suffices. Just warm water is sufficient. ويغسل رأسه ولحيته بالقطر. A person's head and, being a man, their beard should be washed using qitri. Uh, you can use soap. So it was kind of like a soap that was used in previous times. So basically, you want to make sure that the body is washed uh, very well, right? ثم يُسْجَى على شقه الأيسر. Then the person should be made to lie on their left side. Right now, their body is placed on their back. You're going to hold them up from one side, from the left side, so that the right shoulder faces towards the sky, right? And then to pour water over the body the second time. فَيُغْسَلْ بِالْمَاءِ وَالسِّدْرِ. Going to bathe him in this position with water and lotus. حتى يرى أن الماء قد وصل إلى ما يلي التحت. Until you see that the water has reached the other side, i.e. the left shoulder. ثم يرجع على شقه الأيمن. Then you're going to place that body on the right side, on the right shoulder, so the left shoulder now faces the sky. فيغسل بالماء حتى يرى أن الماء قد وصل إلى ميل التحت. And then you to pour water over it until you see that the water has reached the right shoulder. ثم يجلسه, and then the person will make the body in a sitting position. ويسنده, and they're going to basically support the body. Now the body is basically the whole upper part is in a sitting position. Then you'll support that body from the back. ويمسح بطنه مسحا رقيقا. And supporting it, then the person should rub the stomach of the deceased slowly. And the reason why you're doing it is that if there's any content in the stomach, you want it to be removed from the body. So stroking the stomach, rubbing the stomach is to help the body in releasing anything that it might be holding. فإن خرج منه شيء, if something does come out of the body, غسله, you just wash that away, wash that part of the body. ولا يعيد غسله, you don't need to wash it all over again. ثم ينشفه في ثوب. Then what you want to do is you dry the body using a towel or a piece of cloth. ويدرج في أكفانه, and then you're going to place the body in the shroud. ويجعل الحنوط على رأسه ولحيته, and then you are going to apply balm on his head and on his beard, and kafur ala masajidihi, and then you place some kafur on those parts of the body which are touching the ground when a person performs the sajda, which means both hands, the knees, forehead, and the toes. So you'll apply kafur on these areas. And then comes the part where you shroud the deceased. One note I'd place on this is that if the husband dies, the wife can wash him. But if the wife dies, the husband's not allowed to wash her dead body, unless in the case of need where he's the only person there and nobody else, right? And the reason why is uh, because when the husband dies, the wife, her idda period begins, and in the idda period, that marital connection still exists. There's some sort of connection because of which the wife at this moment cannot marry someone else, right? She has to wait, and because that marital connection still exists. But in the case of the wife dying, that connection is now severed, and so the husband and wife are now strangers to each other. And so a stranger man cannot wash the strange woman's body unless, again, case of zarura where he is the only one available. Pray Salatul Janaza. Now, before we actually come back to the praying part of it, I'll show you another video showing basically how to shroud a deceased woman. وأولى الناس بالصلاة على الميت السلطان in حضر. The one who has the most right to lead the prayer is the sultan if he is present. وإن لم يحضر فيستحب تقديم إمام الحي ثم الولي. If he's not present, then the priority is given to the imam of the locality, right? Because that person, and by imam of the locality, uh, take it as the masjid that the person frequents, right? So because that person chose that him to be the imam in their lifetime, so to be their imam after their death would make more sense. So the masjid that that person used to frequent, and the prayer leader over there should lead the prayer. ثم الولي, and then the awliya of that person, right? So that's what the Hanafi fiqh is saying, and it's in front of you. But I would say the closest family member to the deceased, they should lead the prayer because the funeral prayer is basically a dua, right? And the kind of ikhlas that a person's own relative, in most cases, in some cases there may be family feuds and stuff, and a lot of jealousy, animosity, and things like that. But if they had good relations and everything, then the kind of ikhlas that a family member can produce in that dua might not be the kind of ikhlas that some outside person, even the imam of the local masjid, might be able to do, right? Anyhow, just assess the situation to see which might be the most suitable candidate to lead that prayer, and then keep him in front. فإن صلى عليه غير الولي والسلطان, if the sultan or the wali, other than the two, anyone else prays, then أعاد الولي, then the wali is going to repeat the prayer. I mean, it's his family member that has passed away. So you can't have a janaza, you can't have the prayer without that person. وإن صلى عليه الولي, but if the legal guardian, which the Sharia has prescribed, which we've talked about in detail in Kitab al-Nikah and in Mirath, if that person actually prays on the deceased, the funeral prayer, لم يجوز أن يصلي أحد بعده, then no one else can pray. And so if the wali has prayed the funeral prayer, you can't pray another prayer. But if the wali hasn't done that, then the other funeral prayer can be conducted. فإن دفن ولم يصلى عليه, if a person is buried without being prayed over, صلي على قبره إلى 3 أيام, then within 3 days you still have the chance to go to his grave and then pray Salatul Janazah. ولا يصلى بعد ذلك, but after 3 days you can't make Salatul Janazah for him. And we know the 3-day limit because that is what the Prophet ﷺ has told us. ويقوم المصلي بحذاء صدر الميت, and the person is going to stand at the chest level of the deceased, whether it's a man or a woman, right? Because some Aimma suggest that you have to stand in front of the head, and near the head in case of a man, and in the middle in case of a woman. But according to the Hanafi fiqh, whether the deceased is a man or a woman, the imam, the person leading the prayer, will stand on the level of the chest. Now remember, there are only two farz in Salatul Janazah, which is basically the takbirat, right? And the qiyam. So those four takbirs that you do, that's the only farz. So if a person does not know any dua or anything else, that's still okay. They can still join the prayer and it will be valid. So only those four takbirat, those are the farz of the salah. The method, أن يكبر takbira, you say the first takbir, you raise your hands, and you only raise your hands at the first takbir. What do? Yahmadullah ta'ala aqiba, after which you need to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would say the thana. And if you want, you can recite Surah Al-Fatiha, not with the intention of making tilawa, but with the intention of praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثم يكبر takbir. Then you're going to say the second takbir, in which you will not raise your hands. ويصلي على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then you will send salutations and blessings on Prophet عليه السلام. ثم يكبر تكبيرة ثالثة. Then you're going to say the third takbir, and then you're going to supplicate for yourself, the deceased, for the other mu'mineen as well. Now, what kind of dua should you be making for the deceased? There are a number of dua mentioned within the hadith. The most famous that most of us learn is Allahumma firli hayyina wa mayyitina, that Allah forgive our living and our deceased, wa saghirina wa kabirina, our young and old, wa dhakarina wa unthana, our men and women, wa shahidina wa ghaibina, those present in this prayer and those absent. Allahumma man ahyitahum minna fa ahyi al-Islam. Ya Allah, from those of us who you kept alive, keep them alive on Islam. وَمَنْ تَوَفَّيْتَهُ مِنَّا, and those of us who you take away, فَتَوَفَّوْا عَلى الْإِيمَانِ, then take him away or grant him death with Iman. اللهم لا تحرمنا أجر ولا تذلنا بعده, that don't let us go astray after this person, and don't keep from us the benefits of, or the ajr of the deceased. Other du'as that you could do, Allahumma abduk wa ibnu amatik, kana yashhadu la ilaha illa antak wahduk la sharika lak, wa yashhadu anna Muhammadan abduk wa rasuluk, asbaha faqirun ila rahmatik, wa asbahta ghaniyan an azabi, takhalla min ad-dunya wa ahliha, in kana zakiyan fazakkih, wa in kana mukhtiyan faghfir lah, Allahumma la tuhrimna ajrah wa la tuzillana ba'dah. A third dua you could possibly recite, Allahumma ighfir lahu warhamhu wa'afihu wa'afu anhu wa akrim nuzulahu wa wasi' madkhalahu waghsilhu bil ma'i wal thalji wal barad wa naqqihi min al khataya kama naqqayta ath-thawb al abyad min ad-danas wa abdilhu daran khayran min dari wa ahlan khayran min ahli wa zawjan khayran min zawji wa adkhilhu al jannah wa a'idhhu min adhab al-qabr wa adhab an-nar. And there are other du'as as well. You can access all of them from Hisnul Hasin if you want. So this is what you do in the third takbira. Then you kabbir takbira. You're going to say the fourth takbir, and then you're going to do the taslim, right? وَلَا يَرْفَعْ يَدَيْهِ إِلَّا فِي التَّكْبِيرَةِ الْأُولَى. You will not raise your hand except for in the first takbir. وَلَا يُصَلَّى عَلَى مَيْتٍ فِي مَسْجِدِ جَمَاعَةٍ. And the funeral prayer should not be performed inside the masjid, right? It should be performed outside the masjid. But if you know you don't have a lot of space, so at the minimum, keep the body outside the masjid and maybe one or two people or one or two rows, and the rest might be in the masjid, right? And in cases of, if there's a storm brewing outside, even not just brewing, it's raining really heavily, and you fear that it's going to spoil the coffin and the body and stuff like that, then in those exception cases, you might even place the body inside the masjid as well. But normally, you would want to avoid doing that. Now, once you're done with your prayer, you want to take it to the graveyard. فَإِذَا حَمَلُوهُ عَلَى سَرِيرِهِ, when the people carrying the deceased when they place him on the dais, أَخَذُوا بِقَوَائِهِمِ الْأَرْبَعِ, they will hold all four posts. وَيَمْشُونَ بِهِ مُسْرِعِينَ دُونِ الْخَبَرِ, they'll walk briskly, but they're not going to trot. And they'll speed up, but they're not going to run. فَإِذَا بَلَغُوا إِلَى قَبْرِهِ, and when you reach the grave, كُرِهَ لِلنَّاسِ أَن يَجْلِسُوا, it's makruh for people to sit down قَبْلَ أَن يُوزَعَ مِنْ أَعْنَاقِ الرِّجَالِ, before the body is lowered from the neck of the men carrying it. وَيُحْفَرُ الْقَبْرُ وَيُلْحَدْ, the grave is going to be dug out, and a lateral niche is going to be made. So there are two types of graves that can be made, right? There's this shaq in which you just dig out the mud, the sand, and place the deceased and then cover it up. And then there's this lahad in which you dig the grave vertically, and then you dig an area horizontally in the ground, and you need to place the deceased in that horizontal opening in the ground, right? And that's the sunnah way of doing it. But if you're in an area where where the land is very soft, where the earth is soft, right? And you have the fear that if you do the lahad, that vertical lining in the ground is going to fall on the body, then you can avoid doing that as well. وَيُدْخَلَ الْمَيِّتْ مِمَّا يَلِيَ الْقِبْلَةِ, and then the body is going to be placed from the side adjacent to the qibla. And when placing the body within the grave, a person should say, Bismillah wa ala sunnati Rasulillah, or Bismillah wa ala millati Rasulillah, right? وَإِذَا وُضِعَ فِي لَحْدِهِ قَالَ الَّذِي يَزَهُ, when placing in the niche, the person placing him should say, Bismillah wa ala millati Rasulillah, in the name of Allah and according to the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَيُوَجِّهُ إِلَى الْقِبْلَةِ, and you're going to make the body face the qibla. وَيَحُلُّ الْعُقْدَةِ, and you're going to remove the belt tying the coffin. وَيُصَوِّ الْلَبِنَ عَلَى اللَّحَدِ, and then you're going to place the mud bricks over the body. وَيُكْرَهُ الْآجُرُ وَالْخَشَبُ, and to use cemented bricks, baked bricks and wood over the niche, that is makruh. There's no harm in using cane. In other words, what he's saying is you don't need to be extravagant in the burial process, right? So you shouldn't be spending a lot. ثم يحال التراب ويسنم القبر ولا يسطح. Thereafter, you will place in the earth, the sand, to cover that grave, and a hump kind of structure is going to be made. ولا يسطح, you're not going to flatten the earth, or you're not going to make a square or rectangular kind of grave. You're just going to make a hump, like the back of a camel, that kind of grave. Because that's what the Prophet Islam mentioned. He said, Naha an tarbi'ul qubur, that you shouldn't make that square kind of structure for the body. This is for a person who had lived a life, right? What about stillborns? What is the hukum for them? وَمَنِ اسْتَحَلَّ بَعْدَ الْوِلَادَةِ, whoever cries after being born, after coming out of the womb, that person is considered to have been a living person, right? Summiya wa ghusl, they will be named, the ghusl for that baby will be performed. وَصُلِّ عَلَيْهِ, also the prayer will also be performed. But obviously, because a baby or a small child, they don't have any sins, so you will not read the same dua that you do for a grown-up deceased, because for the grown-up deceased, you're asking for maghfirah. But here you don't need to ask for maghfirah because that child has no sins. So what you do is you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make that child a source of ajr for you, the parents, and others in the day of Qiyamah. Allahumma ja'alhu lana zukhran wa ajra, wa ja'alhu lana shafi'an wa mushaffa'a. Or if it's a girl, Allahumma ja'alha lana zukhran wa ajra, wa ja'alha lana shafi'atan wa mushaffa'a. That's the dua that you need to make for a child that has lived before puberty. وَإِن لَمْ يُسْتَحِلْ, but if that child coming out of the body of the womb does not cry, then it's not going to be named. There's no ghusl for it. There's no prayer for it. You're just going to wrap it in a piece of cloth and then you're going to bury it. So that's the hukum for a stillborn person.